Good evening everyone, Harry Conniption here. Tonight's story is going to take us up to Orkney. Now it all started when I was away on one of my fishing trips. One of my many fishing trips I should say. Went from here up to Inverness, then crossed the Moray Firth, which was beautiful. Watched the porpoises and seals swimming. Absolutely gorgeous. Stayed in Dingwall that night. And then I got a ferry. A cheap ferry I may add, from, what is it called? Invergordon. Now, I believed at the time when I made the booked the tickets that it was just a ferry, but it was actually more like a delivery type of boat, and as I was getting on, the smell of crabs, it must have delivered boxes and boxes of crabs. It was so strong. It could make your eyes water. The smell was so strong. But inside, it was beautiful, and you could go back in the top deck, and it was great. It was just the walking on was a bit horrific. Well, not horrific, but a bit smelly, shall we say. But then the ferry took off. The captain was great, showed us where I would be sleeping. It was going to be a really long journey because we were on the cheap really in this fishing trip, and we would wake up and we would be in Orkney. So that night was just sort of on board, looking over, watching the seagulls sort of hovering at the back of the boat and seeing if there was any fish going, or old crabs maybe. We carried on, the weather was lovely. I believe it was in the morning that someone pointed out the stone, it's like a cliff, it's called the Old Man of Orkney, if I remember right. It's like a big rocky outcrop, and it just stands by itself. It was beautiful, just standing watching it in the breeze on the boat, and then we pulled in to Orkney. Like the most beautiful little Scottish place and the most beautiful little Scottish island you could ever imagine. And I thought, yeah, we're going to have a great days fishing, stay overnight, come back next day and head home. That was the plan. So after we went out, got ourselves sorted, got all the fishing gear sorted, and went out and do a bit of trout fishing, hoping for a wee salmon, but didn't have it. It was a good day, thoroughly enjoyable. I thought, we're just feeling tired, and so we thought we'll call a halt and we'll go back to the digs, get a good night's kip. And on the way home, there was like a pub, but it was more like a big croft than a pub. It was long and low, and it was just jumping. You could hear fiddles playing, and you could hear people singing, and just the noise and chatter of people having fun, and it was, and you could smell smoke, which, remember down here you smell coal occasionally, but it was the smell of peat burning that I remember. And we thought I could really do we going for a pint? But my mate was like I'm feeling a wee bit tired. I'm going to put my head down. And I thought, well, I'll catch you a wee bit later. There was one side, the doors, there were people actually standing. It was so busy. They were standing at the doors. And there was another door just beside. And it said lounge. And I thought, oh, I cannot be bothered standing. I've been standing and sitting about all day. I just wanted to sit in a nice warm seat and enjoy a big Glenfiddich and maybe a pint. So I walked in, there was a couple of older chaps at the door, maybe in their, well, maybe ages with myself. And the barman, I went up and got my big Glenfiddich, and he was very generous with his pour, I may add. A wee touch of water, poured it in, and then quite near the door where I came in, the fire was over to my right, and what must have been one of the fella's dogs was lying in front of the fire, just trying to keep itself toasty. And I sat quite near the fire as well, just at the table, just sort of above the dog, and it was just over there. And I was enjoying my Glenfiddich and just thinking what a beautiful place this has been. I mean, the beaches were absolutely stunning. It was like golden sands that you wouldn't believe. And I've been to some of the islands, and they're all gorgeous and they're all striking in their own way. I mean, some are very barren and just full of rock and heather, which is gorgeous and it's stunning. But Orkney was very green with trees and dynamic cliffs, and the beaches were gold. It was beautiful. And so I was just sitting, going over the day and thinking about the walk and seeing the seals again. I had a seal follow me in the water. I was walking along the coast and the seal kept on just looking out the water and swimming, and I thought, is this actually going to come out to see me? It was so nosy, but it was amazing. And then I would walk a bit further, and then it would swim along the coast with me as I was walking. So I'm sitting quite toasty near the fire, drinking my Glenfiddich, thinking about this experience I'd had earlier on that day. And an old fellow walked in with his bonnet. He was a good bit older than myself, and he had a face that was weather beaten, like old leather, and dark and full of crags. And he just came in and he had his wee bonnet and his cane, or his stick I should say, and he came in and just gave a wee nod and a wee glint in his eye, and went and sat down beside me and introduced himself. He said, "I'm pleased to meet you, Peter Mackenzie." And I introduced myself, and we sat and had a blether. His accent was beautiful. He was like a walking poem. He just had a lovely sound to his voice, and when he spoke, it had a lilt and it was soft, but as soon as you got the tune, you could understand what he was saying. And he was asking what I was doing up in the islands, and I was saying I'm up doing a fishing trip, and he was like, you'll be doing no bad with the fishing up here. And I was going, yeah, we had a great day, it was lovely, and told him about the walking, the sea, and he was talking about the seals, and he'd be like, you need to watch out for the kelpies, mind. And I was just laughing. He was just talking about these mythical Scottish creatures, and we're blethering, and I was like, what do you do? And he says, well, I used to have the farm, and I had the cattle. And I was like, do do you not have them anymore? And he went, no, I don't have them anymore. He says, I miss them, mind. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. Did you have to get rid of them? And he went, no, they all drowned one night. And I said, excuse me? And he says, aye. He said, I was swimming on moor to the other island there. And I said, sorry, you were swimming? And he went, aye, I had Big Ennis the Bull. And I was too much information, and it was catching me sort of off guard. And I said, Big Ennis the Bull? And he said, he said, I had him since he was a wee calf. He was a great bull, he said. And he made me laugh. He said, I had stains on it, like curling stains, he said. He said it was a big bull. He said it was a big bull. And he was awfully proud of this big bull, Big Ennis. And he was telling me how it was like a pup. He said absolutely adored him. And he said how they just became really close since it was just a wee calf. And it grew into this monster of a bull. Now he told me the breed, and I can't remember what breed it was. But it was some breed that was known to the islands. And he was, as I say, very proud of Big Ennis the Bull. And I said, so, what happened? And he said, well, I was swimming at the moor to new pastures. And I kept on saying, what do you mean by swimming? Because I thought I'd picked him up wrong. I thought he was meaning like in the boat. He'd put them on a boat, swimming the moor. And he went, he says, no, I'd lead Big Ennis by the rope on the back of their own boat, and I would row out to the island, and then the herd would follow Big Ennis, and we would all just swim out. And I was like, it just seemed like something from a bygone era. It was, I was just imagining this old farmer in his rowboat splashing through the water. Got a hold of Big Ennis, or Big Ennis is tied to the back, and he goes out to the island for them to graze. And seemingly they've been doing it for generations. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And he says, aye. And I said, so what happened? He says, well, I'd left it just a wee bit later, but I was wanting to get them back because of the weather was going to turn. And the wind was starting to pick up. But he was so far in that he couldn't get back. So he had to just try and carry on. So he's rowing, and he's looking, and he's seeing the way the seagulls are flying. He can tell that the wind's picking up, he can see it blowing. And he's looking at old Ennis, looking back at him. And he can see that he's just starting to struggle. Peter could see like a wee rocky island. It wasn't an island, it was more like a rock sticking up. And he thought, if I can make it there, then he might be able to take his own weight. So he was trying to row to the rock. But old Ennis is pulling its head down, and the back of the boat's going down and the front's going up, and he's thinking, just hang on. He's rowing, but old Ennis is mooing, and he could see his eyes bulging, and he was thinking, please, just let me make land. Just let me make land. Old Ennis went down once, but he managed to fight his way back up. Old Peter was rowing, managed to pull him back up. And the coos are still, you could hear the coos just moan and moan in the background. You could hear them as they were trying to swim and catch up, but they were having a problem as well, keeping up. The waves were just getting bigger and bigger. The wind was getting stronger and stronger. And Peter said, I never had the arms for it anymore. He said, I just about gave out. And old Ennis was a puff and couldn't swim any further. He said, the front of the boat was up in the air, and if I hadn't untied it, I would have been down with the bull. Aye, he was the best bull I ever had. Aye, he was sad. You could see it written all over his face. And he would tell you himself, he says, I've never get over it. He says, I watched Big Ennis's eyes, he said. His eyes was full of fear, and it went down a couple of times, and then it went down the last time, and that was the last of Big Ennis. And then the herd scattered. And that was them. The herd was away too. So I was like, oh my God, this is heartbreaking. But not only that, it's horrific. I was just absolutely like, oh, I'm so sorry, this is. And he was like, I never had the heart to actually try and get another herd together. I just, didn't bother. He says, the strange thing is, most nights, if I'm down near the water, I can still hear them lowing and the mooing of them. And I know it can't be, it must be just my imagination. Can you hear the herd in the water? Sometimes I can hear them at the window, and I know they're not there. This time I'm captivated. I've got my mouth's open, I'm just listening. And he says, the other fishermen, when they're out in the boats, they've told me that they hear the bull and they hear the coos. They can hear them mooing. That sort of distressed moo that you would know if you had cows. And I was like, that's horrible. And he was like, aye. So he took the head off his stick. He had this lovely eagle head walking stick, and he took the tap off it, and he had a big sort of glass flask in it full of whiskey, and he poured it into the cap, and he sat and he had a big dram, and then had his pipe. So I had a wee puff, and just like he'd come in, he said, well, it was nice talking to you. I hope to see you again. Scraped out his pipe, cleaned it on the table, grabbed his cap and his walking stick with the eagle head, and off he went. And I was sitting there and I just thought about this story that he just told me. And I found it really haunting, that this, and the picture that I had in my head about these coos drowning in Big Ennis The Bull. And then I started thinking about him hearing, they could hear him, he could hear Big Ennis, and and he could hear the coos. And it put a chill right up the back of my neck. And I thought, that's enough for me tonight. I finished my big Glenfiddich and my pint, and I said cheers to the men at the bar, and then I headed out the door. So just as I'm heading out the door, here the boys from next door, two of them grabbed me and said, "Come on in for a pint." He said, "The drinks are on old Peter." And I was like, oh, okay, I'll have one more before. There was no point in arguing with these drunk bums. They weren't taking no for an answer anyway. The place was mobbed, and as I say, you could hear music and fiddles and people blethering, and it was a good time was being had by all. And the fella came and he gave me a big whiskey and he said, "That's the old Peter, he left it behind the bar for you." And he says, "If you want to see him, he's over there in the corner." And I went, "I'll go and have a wee." Say cheerio, thanks for the drink before I go. So I drank most of it and I went over to the corner. And near in the corner was a coffin. And I looked round, and for the first time I realised it was awake. Everybody had the black ties pulled down, and they were all just, some of them were just casual, but it was awake. And the coffin was sitting in the corner with the old man's bonnet on it, and his walking stick with the eagle's head just resting on the coffin.